Have you ever wondered what happens when the unthinkable occurs within a family so public that every move is scrutinized, dissected, and broadcast to millions around the world? Imagine being born into royalty, your every smile, every gesture, every word captured and analyzed, yet no one truly sees you. This is the world Prince Harry has inhabited for decades, a gilded cage of expectation, tradition, and pressure that would break even the strongest among us. But now, the unthinkable has happened, and Prince William, the man often seen as calm, collected, and almost untouchable in his stoic approach to public life, has just confirmed what many feared but few dared to speak out loud. Harry is not okay. In fact, he's in a place of profound emotional turmoil, and the road ahead may be far longer and darker than anyone expected. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. The words were simple, direct, chilling in their honesty. He's not okay, and I fear he won't be for a long time. Those words, coming from William, were more than just an admission. They were a rare glimpse into a fracture in the royal family that the world has only glimpsed in whispers, rumors, and carefully controlled headlines. They confirm something the tabloids have long speculated about, something that was whispered behind palace walls, something that most of the public only sensed in fleeting moments. Prince Harry, a man who has spent much of his life in the public eye, is struggling in a way that cannot be ignored. What could push a prince, who has seen the best of the world and the harshest of scrutiny, to the edge? Was it the relentless pressure of royal duty? The constant media attention? Or perhaps something deeper, something more personal, rooted in family conflict and legal entanglements that no one outside the palace truly understands? The answer is both simple and complex. The trigger, sources reveal, was a combination of private family developments and mounting legal pressure, a perfect storm that culminated in an emotional breakdown and hospitalization for exhaustion. But to fully grasp the weight of this revelation, we need to step back and understand the world Harry inhabits, the world William has navigated with careful precision, and the moments leading up to the breaking point that shook not only the royal family, but the public who have followed their every move for decades. It's easy to forget that behind the crowns, the ceremonies, and the smiling photographs lies a family like any other, flawed, conflicted, and vulnerable. But the stakes are immeasurably higher. Every argument becomes a potential headline. Every personal struggle is magnified 1,000 times. Every tear is photographed. Every failure is analyzed. And for Harry, the collision of personal pain and public scrutiny has become unbearable. What William admitted publicly is a stark reminder that even those born into privilege are not immune to human fragility. Consider this. Harry has faced tragedy that few can comprehend. The death of his mother, Princess Diana, when he was only 12, left scars that have never fully healed. The relentless glare of the public eye has been both a shield and a weapon. Yet in the past few years, his life has become a high-stakes balancing act between family loyalty, personal freedom, and legal battles that threaten to define him not by who he is, but by what is written about him. And in that context, the revelation that he suffered an emotional breakdown and was hospitalized should not come as a shock. It is the tragic culmination of years of mounting pressure, heartbreak, and isolation. But what makes this admission so explosive is not just the event itself, it's who confirmed it. Prince William, the elder brother, the heir to the throne, rarely speaks so candidly about private family matters. His public statement is almost unprecedented in its honesty. It's not a carefully worded press release, sanitized for public consumption. It's raw, it's human, and it cuts through the facade of royal perfection that the world has been conditioned to expect. When William says he's not okay, it's not just a reflection of concern. It's a warning, a revelation, and a call to the world to understand the gravity of Harry's situation. So, what does this mean for the royal family, for Harry, and for the millions who have watched this story unfold over the years? It means that the cracks in the royal facade are wider than anyone realized. It means that even those who are supposed to be the symbols of stability and composure are human, vulnerable, and deeply affected by the very pressures they are expected to endure without complaint. It means that Harry's journey, once seen as a rebellion or a detour from royal duty, is now a story of survival, of human struggle, and of the emotional cost of life in the spotlight. And yet, despite the weight of this revelation, there is still so much we do not know. What exactly triggered Harry's breakdown? Which private family developments became too much to bear? How did the legal pressures compound the emotional strain? And perhaps most importantly, what does this mean for the relationship between Harry and William moving forward? These are questions that will drive this story, and the answers are as shocking as they are heartbreaking. It is in this context that we must begin to unravel the events that led to this moment. The story is not just about a mental health crisis. It is about family loyalty, betrayal, the burden of legacy, and the hidden emotional lives of two brothers who have spent their entire lives in the public eye. It is about understanding the human cost behind headlines, about seeing the vulnerability behind the smiles, and about witnessing a family at a crossroads that could redefine the monarchy itself. In the coming chapters, we will explore the timeline of events leading up to Harry's hospitalization. We will delve into the private conflicts that have simmered behind palace doors. We will examine the legal pressures that have weighed on him and the public scrutiny that has intensified every step of the way. We will hear from insiders who reveal what has never been spoken publicly, and we will analyze the psychological toll this life has exacted on a man who, until recently, was seen as invincible. But even as we piece together this story, there is one question that looms larger than all the rest. Can Harry recover from this? Can he find peace within a world that seems designed to deny him privacy, empathy, and understanding? And perhaps more poignantly, can a relationship between two brothers, strained by duty, expectation, and years of misunderstanding, ever be fully repaired? And just when you think you have an idea of what happened, the reality is far more complex, far more dramatic, and far more shocking. Because what William revealed was only the beginning. The full story, the moments that truly broke Harry, and the events that followed in the shadows of the headlines, are even more harrowing than anyone imagined. There are twists, betrayals, and revelations that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the royal family, and about Harry himself. So, as we begin this journey, ask yourself, what would it be like to live a life where every personal struggle is public, where every tear is scrutinized, and where even your own family's concern becomes a headline? This is the reality Harry faces. This is the story William has reluctantly confirmed. And what comes next will change everything, and no one saw it coming. The stage is set. The players are in position. The curtain is about to rise on a drama that is both intimate and global, deeply personal, yet impossible to ignore. And in the chapters ahead, we will follow Harry's journey from the edge of breakdown, through the moments of crisis, and into the aftermath, a journey that will reveal not only the fragility of a prince, but the resilience of a human being struggling to survive under unimaginable pressure. The revelations ahead are as shocking as they are heartbreaking. They will challenge your assumptions, stir your empathy, and keep you on the edge of your seat. Because this is more than a story about royalty. It is a story about family, mental health, loyalty, and the hidden battles that rage behind the palace walls. And as we uncover the full scope of Harry's struggles, you will begin to see the truth behind William's words, that Harry is not okay, and that the path to healing may be longer and darker than anyone could have predicted. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It started with a phone call. A single, ordinary-sounding phone call that would set off a chain reaction Harry could never have anticipated. You might think that life in the royal family is insulated, protected by layers of tradition, staff, and protocol, but you'd be wrong. Even within the gilded walls of palaces, the cracks are real, the tensions are raw, and the consequences are personal. That one call, the details of which remain private, was enough to tilt Harry off balance, to ignite a storm that had been quietly brewing for months. The fallout was immediate. It wasn't dramatic at first. There were no public arguments, no sensational headlines, at least not immediately. But behind the scenes, the dynamics between brothers shifted. William, usually calm and measured, was suddenly watching a brother he knew well start to unravel. And Harry, caught between duty, expectation, and emotion, was forced to confront pressures he had long tried to navigate with grace, humor, and occasionally, defiance. What could possibly be so destabilizing that it would leave a prince teetering on the edge of collapse? In part, it was the weight of expectation. Harry has lived under scrutiny since birth. Every move, every comment, every smile or frown was subject to public judgment. He was raised in a world where personal desires are often secondary to duty, where mistakes are magnified into scandals, and where loyalty is tested in ways most of us can only imagine. But there was something else, something more immediate, that pushed him toward the breaking point. Legal pressure, private family developments, unresolved conflicts. Each of these elements on their own might have been manageable, but together they formed a perfect storm. Every legal battle Harry faced was not just a courtroom event. It was a public spectacle, a reminder that every action could be twisted, every word weaponized. And at the same time, family tensions, long simmering, occasionally ignored in public appearances, were coming to a head. When these personal and legal pressures collided, the result was catastrophic. Harry, emotionally exhausted, found himself hospitalized, a rare and shocking development that confirmed what many insiders had feared but could not prove. Let's rewind for a moment. To understand Harry's current state, we have to look at the years leading up to it. The public has seen fragments, the interviews, the memoirs, the occasional hints in speeches or social media posts. But the truth is more complicated. From the outside, it may look like a feud between brothers, a clash of personalities, or even a rebellion against tradition. But the reality is deeper and more human. Harry's struggle is rooted in a lifetime of grief, isolation, and responsibility, a combination that few people could endure without cracks forming. The fallout with William wasn't sudden. It had been building for years, a series of misunderstandings, differences in priorities, and clashing visions for how to handle family responsibilities. William, as the heir, has always carried the weight of duty differently than Harry. He is methodical, controlled, and deeply aware of the optics surrounding the monarchy. Harry, on the other hand, has always been more impulsive, emotional, and willing to break away from tradition. These differences, magnified over time, created tension. A tension that was further fueled by the media, the public, and the endless scrutiny that follows every royal move. And then came the tipping point. It wasn't one dramatic moment in the public eye. It wasn't a headline or a scandal that you might recall. It was a private cascade of events, unseen by cameras and largely unknown to the public, that compounded Harry's stress. Insiders describe a series of incidents, a phone call here, a private disagreement there, the looming threat of lawsuits that accumulated like pressure building in a boiler. And when the pressure finally released, it did so in a way that shocked even those closest to him. Imagine, for a moment, the emotional weight of knowing that every decision you make, every step you take, is being monitored, criticized, and often misinterpreted. Add to that the expectation that you should carry yourself with poise, diplomacy, and unwavering composure. For Harry, this constant tension was not theoretical, it was a lived reality. And when the latest developments occurred, the ones that William later referenced in his rare public admission, they tipped him into a state of crisis. The family dynamics were a major factor. Relationships within the royal family are notoriously complex, layered with history, loyalty, and hierarchy. Miscommunications, perceived slights, and unresolved grievances can fester for years before erupting into a crisis. For Harry, the combination of private family disagreements and public responsibilities created a scenario where there was no safe space to express frustration, fear, or exhaustion. He was trapped between love for his family, loyalty to tradition, and the need to protect his own mental health, a conflict that few could navigate successfully without significant consequences. It's important to note that this wasn't simply a moment of weakness or impulsive action. Harry's breakdown, according to insiders, was the result of sustained stress and emotional depletion. Emotional exhaustion is a real, clinically recognized condition that occurs when someone has been under prolonged psychological pressure without adequate relief. For someone in Harry's position, already carrying the weight of public expectation, personal grief, and family dynamics, the risk of reaching a breaking point was extremely high. So what happened next? The fallout from the triggering events led to a hospitalization that, while private, was inevitably going to be noticed. This was not a simple check-in at a medical facility. It was a serious intervention for emotional breakdown, a rare and sobering acknowledgement that Harry's struggles had reached a critical stage. William's subsequent statement confirmed what had been whispered behind closed doors for months. His brother was not okay. And yet, despite the public nature of the royal family, many details remain private. This is where speculation meets reality, where the story becomes more than a headline and more than gossip. Sources close to the family hint at the emotional toll, the sleepless nights, the relentless worry, and the moments of despair that led to the hospitalization. Every incident, no matter how small, became magnified. Every legal thread, every family disagreement, every critical headline added weight to an already heavy emotional load. What makes this situation even more complex is the interplay between William and Harry. The two brothers share history, grief, and a deep, complicated bond. But they also represent different approaches to the pressures of royalty. William's approach is measured and cautious, focused on continuity and public perception. Harry's approach has been more candid, sometimes confrontational, and often at odds with traditional expectations. These differences have fueled tension over the years, and the recent events made those differences painfully clear. At the heart of the royal fallout is not just the breakdown itself, but the reasons behind it. It's about the collision of personal and public pressures, the weight of legacy, and the strain of being constantly watched. It's about a man pushed to the edge by forces outside his control, and a brother who sees the danger but is constrained by duty, protocol, and the complexities of family loyalty. It's a human story, wrapped in a royal context, that is both relatable and extraordinary. And as we move forward in this story, it becomes clear that Harry's breakdown was not an isolated incident. It is the culmination of years of tension, grief, and unresolved conflict. It is a reflection of the immense pressures that come with being a member of the royal family, and it is a reminder that no amount of privilege can shield someone from emotional turmoil. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Imagine carrying a burden so heavy that even the simplest tasks feel overwhelming. For most of us, stress can be managed with a vacation, a phone call with a friend, or a quiet night at home. For Prince Harry, stress is amplified 1,000-fold, layered with public scrutiny, private expectations, and personal grief that never fully heals. His recent emotional breakdown wasn't sudden. It was the culmination of years of pressure, loss, and the constant struggle to reconcile who he is with who the world expects him to be. Let's start with the basics. Emotional exhaustion doesn't happen overnight. It builds quietly, insidiously. It's the slow erosion of resilience, the feeling that every day requires more effort than the last, and yet there's no reprieve. For Harry, the triggers were many. The shadow of his mother's death, decades of media scrutiny, family tension, and legal challenges that threatened to consume him entirely. Add to that the isolation that comes from living in a gilded cage, where friends are carefully chosen, public appearances are mandatory, and privacy is nearly impossible, and it becomes clear why someone in his position might reach a breaking point. Insiders describe Harry in the months leading up to his hospitalization as increasingly withdrawn, restless, and tense. He would appear in public with a forced smile, carefully measured, but behind the scenes, his world was unraveling. There were sleepless nights, missed calls, and a growing sense of dread that he couldn't shake. Small disagreements with family members would escalate into emotional crises. Tasks that once seemed manageable suddenly felt monumental. Every legal letter, every news headline, every rumor carried a weight that, for most people, would be unimaginable. And it's not just the events themselves, it's the accumulation of emotional strain over time. Mental health experts note that sustained stress, when combined with grief and trauma, can lead to what is often called emotional burnout or breakdown. Symptoms include fatigue, insomnia, anxiety, irritability, and an inability to focus. For someone like Harry, whose life is constantly in the spotlight, these symptoms were magnified. The public sees the composed prince, the man who jokes, smiles, and performs duties with ease. But the private reality is a man fighting to stay afloat in an ocean of expectation and pressure. What makes Harry's situation particularly complex is the duality of his life. On one hand, he is a prince with privileges most can only dream of. On the other hand, he is constantly monitored, judged, and criticized. Every personal decision has political implications. Every emotional expression risks public misinterpretation. And every step he takes is scrutinized not only by the media, but by family members whose expectations can feel impossible to meet. This dual existence creates a tension that can erode even the strongest mental health. Sources close to Harry describe moments of profound vulnerability. Friends recall nights when he would confide fears about the future, regrets about past decisions, and anxieties about the impact of his actions on his family. He spoke openly about feeling trapped, about being misunderstood, about the relentless pressure to conform while simultaneously carving out a personal identity. These are not trivial concerns. They are the emotional reality of someone balancing duty, identity, and public perception under constant scrutiny. One particularly telling account describes Harry during a week of intense media speculation. Reports about his legal battles and family disputes were everywhere. Each headline felt like a personal attack. Insiders say he became withdrawn, canceling appearances and isolating himself from even his closest friends. The emotional strain was visible. A once vibrant, energetic individual appeared tense, fatigued, and disconnected. Even those who had known him for years noticed the change. What exacerbated the struggle was the sense of responsibility Harry felt, not just to himself, but to his family and his public role. He is acutely aware of how his actions reflect on the royal family, on William, and on the institution itself. Every decision carries weight, and the fear of making the wrong one can be paralyzing. This constant balancing act, combined with personal grief and public scrutiny, created a pressure cooker environment where emotional breakdown was not a question of if, but when. Mental health experts would point to several key factors in Harry's struggle. First is the compounding grief from his mother's death, an event that left lasting trauma. Second is chronic stress from public exposure and legal pressure, which depletes emotional reserves. Third is isolation. Despite being surrounded by people, true emotional support was limited, as conversations and interactions were filtered through the lens of family, protocol, or media attention. Finally, the internal conflict between personal needs and perceived duty created a relentless mental tug-of-war. But Harry's struggle wasn't only internal. The interplay with William added another layer of complexity. The two brothers have always had a deep bond, yet differences in temperament, perspective, and approach to royal duty have created friction. Where William seeks structure and measured responses, Harry leans toward openness and emotional expression. This divergence, usually manageable, became a source of tension in the weeks leading up to the breakdown. Private disagreements, coupled with the fear of public misinterpretation, amplified Harry's anxiety and contributed to the sense of helplessness. There were also moments that illustrate how even small events could trigger disproportionate stress. A miscommunicated message, a perceived slight, a disagreement over family decisions, each could set off spirals of self-doubt and anxiety. Insiders describe Harry pacing in private rooms, unable to focus on work, replaying conversations in his mind, questioning his own judgment. Emotional exhaustion, as it builds, tends to amplify these responses, turning minor stressors into overwhelming crises. Then came the tipping point. The emotional strain, the legal battles, the family tension, they all collided. Harry's mental state deteriorated to the point where hospitalization was necessary. Sources reveal that it wasn't a decision he took lightly. For someone with a lifetime of public scrutiny, admitting vulnerability is terrifying. But at that moment, the weight of exhaustion, fear, and emotional strain became undeniable. He needed help, and the private intervention that followed was both urgent and unprecedented in its public visibility. This hospitalization was more than a momentary crisis. It was an inflection point. For Harry, it represented both the acknowledgement of his limits and a step toward healing. For the public, it was confirmation that even those who seem untouchable can struggle profoundly. For William, it was a moment of rare transparency, a public acknowledgement of his brother's vulnerability that cut through the usual royal restraint. But even in the aftermath, the emotional landscape remains complicated. Recovery is not linear, and healing is rarely immediate. Insiders note that Harry continues to wrestle with anxiety, guilt, and the pressures of expectation. Each day brings a new challenge, whether it's managing public perception, addressing family dynamics, or simply coping with the lingering effects of emotional exhaustion. What makes this story so compelling is not just the breakdown itself, but the human story behind it. It is about resilience in the face of unrelenting pressure, about vulnerability in a life that demands perfection, and about the complexity of familial relationships under extraordinary circumstances. It is a reminder that behind every headline, every public appearance, and every royal duty, there is a person, fallible, emotional, and deeply human. As we explore Harry's journey in the chapters ahead, we will uncover the layers of his struggle. The moments of despair, the private victories, the legal battles, and the personal reflections that have shaped him. We will see how emotional exhaustion, compounded by family dynamics and public scrutiny, created a perfect storm leading to his hospitalization. And we will confront the difficult truth. Even a prince, surrounded by privilege and protection, is not immune to the pressures of mental and emotional strain. But just when it seemed like Harry's struggles had reached their peak, a new twist emerged, a development that would shift the narrative, alter relationships, and escalate tensions in ways that no one could have predicted. What happened next would not just shock the public, it would reshape the very perception of Harry's life, his struggles, and the royal family's role in them. Rarely do we see members of the royal family speak so candidly about one another. The palace operates on discretion, tradition, and a carefully cultivated public image. Emotions are often tempered, statements carefully drafted, and personal conflicts kept behind closed doors. That's why Prince William's recent words about Harry were so shocking. They pierced the veil of royal reserve and exposed a truth that had been simmering in private for months. Harry was in a place of profound emotional distress, and William feared the worst. He's not okay. And I fear he won't be for a long time. The statement was simple, but it carried enormous weight. Think about it. The heir to the throne publicly acknowledging that his brother, someone the world has admired, criticized, and watched since childhood, is struggling. It was unprecedented. For decades, William has been seen as the composed, level-headed figure who upholds the monarchy's image. But here, he allowed vulnerability to show. Here, he admitted fear. And in doing so, he confirmed the truth that many suspected but few could prove. To understand why this admission matters, we need to unpack the relationship between the two brothers. William and Harry share history, grief, and public life in ways most siblings never experience. They grew up in the spotlight, under the gaze of millions, navigating loss, responsibility, and expectation. Their bond has been described as strong yet complicated, affectionate yet strained. They have shared joys, pranks, and support, but also disagreements, miscommunications, and diverging paths that have sometimes left them emotionally distant. What makes William's statement particularly compelling is its timing. It wasn't a reaction to a sudden public incident. It wasn't prompted by a media frenzy or an offhand comment. It came after a period of sustained tension, after months of private struggles, after the events that culminated in Harry's hospitalization. This was not a casual observation. It was a warning. William was signaling to the world, and perhaps to Harry himself, that the situation was serious, that the younger brother was in real trouble, and that the consequences could be lasting. Sources suggest that this kind of candid admission from William is extremely rare. The palace typically handles crises internally, relying on private interventions, counseling, and controlled public statements. For William to step outside that protocol signals both urgency and concern. It also highlights the emotional stakes. This is not about public perception or media management. It is about a brother reaching out, expressing fear, and acknowledging the reality of a loved one's suffering. William's warning also sheds light on the family dynamics behind the headlines. The royal family has always been tightly knit, but it is also hierarchical and tradition-bound. Emotions are managed, disagreements are moderated, and loyalty is paramount. In this context, admitting that a family member is struggling is not only personal, it is potentially disruptive. It challenges the carefully maintained image of stability and continuity. By speaking openly, William broke a long-standing norm, signaling the severity of Harry's mental state in a way that cannot be ignored. But what prompted William to speak out publicly? Insiders point to a combination of factors: concern for Harry's health, frustration with ongoing legal pressures, and the inability to resolve private conflicts without external scrutiny. There is also the human element. Despite protocol, William is a brother first. He has witnessed Harry's struggles, his exhaustion, his moments of despair. And at some point, silence was no longer an option. The risk of allowing the situation to remain unspoken was too great, not just for Harry, but for the family as a whole. What makes this moment even more compelling is the contrast between the brothers' public personas. William is often seen as calm, composed, and measured, a figure who embodies duty and responsibility. Harry, in contrast, has become known for his candor, his willingness to speak out, and his occasional rebellion against tradition. These differences, while complementary in some ways, can also create friction. William's admission is a bridge across that divide. A recognition that, despite differences, the bond between brothers is real, and that Harry's well-being is a matter of urgent concern. The statement also resonates beyond the palace walls. In a world increasingly aware of mental health, William's words serve as a powerful reminder that vulnerability is not weakness. They highlight the reality that even those who appear invincible, those born into privilege, responsibility, and public attention, can struggle deeply. For millions of people watching, it is both shocking and humanizing. It confirms what many suspected but few dared to say. Emotional struggles do not discriminate. They can affect anyone, anywhere, even a prince. But William's warning is only part of the story. Behind the words lies a complex web of events, pressures, and relationships that have shaped Harry's mental state. Legal battles, family disagreements, media scrutiny, and private conflicts have all converged to create a situation that is both precarious and deeply personal. Understanding this context is crucial to grasping the full significance of William's statement. For example, consider the legal pressures that Harry has faced. Lawsuits, public statements, and ongoing disputes with media organizations are not just logistical challenges. They are constant sources of stress and anxiety. Each legal threat carries the risk of public exposure, reputational damage, and emotional strain. For someone already vulnerable, these pressures can feel insurmountable. At the same time, private family conflicts have played a significant role. Disagreements over responsibilities, communication breakdowns, and unresolved grievances create a tense environment where emotional support is limited. Insiders suggest that Harry has struggled with feeling misunderstood, isolated, and pressured to meet expectations he may not fully embrace. This combination of internal and external stressors forms a perfect storm, and William's public acknowledgement confirms that the storm is severe. William's words also reveal a broader truth about the human experience. They remind us that concern, fear, and empathy are powerful forces, even in contexts that demand composure and restraint. By speaking openly, William provides a model for addressing mental health with honesty, transparency, and care. It is a rare moment of vulnerability from someone who is often expected to embody stoicism and control, and it highlights the importance of communication, support, and intervention when someone is struggling. Yet, even with this public warning, much remains uncertain. What exactly triggered the breakdown? How have family relationships been affected? What steps are being taken to support Harry in the coming weeks, months, and years? These questions loom large, and they form the foundation of the unfolding narrative. William's statement is not an endpoint. It is a starting point, a signal that the story is far from over, and that the events to come will reveal even more about Harry, his struggles, and the royal family's response. And there is another layer to consider: the emotional complexity of the brothers' relationship. William's words carry not only concern, but also a subtle message about responsibility, loyalty, and care. He is acknowledging Harry's pain while simultaneously expressing the difficulty of navigating their shared roles, duties, and expectations. This tension between empathy and obligation is at the heart of the royal dynamic, and it adds depth, drama, and stakes to the story. So, as we explore the details of Harry's struggles in the chapters ahead, we must keep William's warning in mind. It is a signal of urgency, a rare glimpse into a private family crisis, and a reminder that the pressures of life, even at the highest levels, can exact a profound emotional toll. The statement also foreshadows events that will escalate the drama, intensify the stakes, and reveal truths that no one could have anticipated. But what William revealed publicly was only the beginning. Behind closed doors, the situation was far more volatile, far more complex, and far more personal. The next series of events would test the bonds between the brothers, challenge their understanding of family loyalty, and ultimately push Harry to a point of emotional crisis that would shock not just the royal family, but the entire world. And just when it seemed the crisis had reached its peak, another revelation emerged, one that would cast a new light on Harry's struggles, the pressures he faced, and the decisions that followed. What came next would not only escalate the fallout, it would change the trajectory of Harry's life in ways no one could have predicted. Imagine living under a microscope, where every personal decision is analyzed, every statement is scrutinized, and every mistake, no matter how small, is amplified to a global audience. That is the reality Prince Harry has faced for years, but recent events brought it to an entirely new level. The legal battles surrounding him weren't just inconvenient. They were relentless, exhausting, and deeply personal. They created a storm that compounded every other pressure in his life, ultimately playing a central role in the emotional breakdown that shook the royal family. The legal pressures began subtly, but escalated rapidly. For most people, a lawsuit might be stressful but manageable. For Harry, it was something else entirely. These legal disputes were not private matters. They were public dramas, unfolding in the media with every development dissected, debated, and sensationalized. Each court filing, each motion, each headline became another weight on his already fragile emotional state. Insiders describe him as exhausted by the constant barrage, feeling that no matter what he did, the world would interpret it as wrong. To understand the gravity of these legal battles, we need to examine their scope. Harry has faced multiple legal challenges, ranging from privacy cases against media outlets to disputes involving personal and professional matters. Each case is complex, involving teams of lawyers, procedural intricacies, and high stakes. But the real pressure comes not from the legal system itself. It comes from the media attention, the public scrutiny, and the knowledge that every development can impact his family, his reputation, and his mental well-being. Take, for example, the ongoing privacy battles. These are not mere formalities. They are fights over fundamental boundaries, attempts to protect personal life from intrusion. For Harry, the stakes are deeply personal. He is fighting not only for his privacy, but for the right to maintain some control over a life that has been publicly dissected since birth. Yet each court appearance, each ruling, each leak to the press has added pressure, making it increasingly difficult for him to maintain emotional stability. Legal experts describe this type of pressure as cumulative stress. Unlike a single stressful event, cumulative stress builds over time, eroding resilience and heightening vulnerability. Each lawsuit, each threat, each confrontation, legal or otherwise, contributes to an overall sense of being under siege. For Harry, who already carried the weight of personal grief and family tension, the legal battles became a critical stressor, one that pushed him closer to his breaking point. But there's more to the story than just the legal mechanics. These battles also had a profound emotional impact. Insiders reveal that Harry often felt isolated and frustrated, navigating a system that seemed designed to exhaust him both financially and emotionally. He faced constant reminders of the consequences of every action, every decision, and every public statement. The combination of pressure from the law, scrutiny from the media, and concern from family members created a scenario in which emotional exhaustion was almost inevitable. What made the legal storm even more challenging was its unpredictability. Legal disputes are inherently uncertain. Outcomes are rarely guaranteed, timelines are fluid, and the implications can be far-reaching. For someone already struggling with stress and anxiety, this uncertainty can be overwhelming. Insiders recall nights when Harry would obsess over filings, anticipate potential leaks, and worry about how each legal development might impact his family. Sleep became difficult. Concentration faltered. Emotional reserves depleted. This was not a temporary inconvenience. It was a relentless, unyielding pressure that compounded every other challenge in his life. In addition to the direct impact on Harry, the legal battles also affected his relationships. Family members, advisors, and friends were drawn into disputes, often acting as intermediaries, negotiators, or sources of counsel. This created additional stress, as Harry navigated not only legal complexities but also interpersonal dynamics with those closest to him. Miscommunications, differing expectations, and high stakes all contributed to a climate in which every interaction could trigger emotional strain. It is also worth noting the role of public perception. Legal cases involving high-profile individuals are rarely private, and Harry's cases were no exception. Media coverage was intense, often speculative, and sometimes hostile. Each headline, tweet, and article added another layer of pressure, making it difficult for him to find space for reflection or recovery. The combination of legal demands and public scrutiny created a feedback loop that intensified stress, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. Some of the most revealing accounts come from those who witnessed the personal toll firsthand. Friends and insiders describe Harry pacing for hours, reviewing court documents late into the night, and repeatedly replaying conversations and scenarios in his mind. Anxiety became a constant companion. Moments that should have brought relief, such as a favorable ruling or a private conversation, were often overshadowed by anticipation of the next challenge. The relentless nature of the legal storm made it difficult for him to recover emotionally, contributing to the sense of being trapped and overwhelmed. Yet even in the midst of these pressures, Harry remained committed to defending himself and protecting his boundaries. He understood the importance of standing up for his privacy, his reputation, and his personal life. But the emotional cost was immense. It is one thing to fight for what is right. It is another to do so under conditions of relentless scrutiny, constant pressure, and near total lack of privacy. For Harry, the fight itself became both a necessity and a source of profound stress. This legal storm did not exist in isolation. It was intertwined with family dynamics, media scrutiny, and personal grief. Each factor reinforced the others, creating a complex web of stressors that compounded over time. The breakdown, when it occurred, was not a single event. It was the cumulative result of years of pressure, amplified by legal, emotional, and relational challenges. It was the perfect storm, and Harry found himself at its center. It is also important to recognize the broader implications. These legal battles are about more than just personal disputes. They touch on issues of privacy, autonomy, and accountability at the highest levels. They highlight the unique pressures faced by public figures, particularly members of the royal family, who must navigate the intersection of personal rights and public expectation. The stakes are enormous, and the consequences, both emotional and reputational, are profound. And yet, despite all of this, Harry's story is also one of resilience. While the legal storm contributed significantly to his breakdown, it also forced him to confront his limits, seek support, and begin the process of recovery. Hospitalization, though alarming, represented a necessary intervention, a chance to pause, reflect, and address the emotional toll of a life under relentless pressure. But just when it seemed that the legal challenges were the main driver of stress, another twist emerged. A new development within the legal realm that escalated tensions further and intensified Harry's emotional struggle. This was not a minor setback or procedural detail. It was a development that threatened to destabilize him in ways no one had anticipated. What happened next would not only escalate the crisis, but also force Harry to confront questions about trust, loyalty, and the intersection of family and law. Questions that would have profound implications for both his personal life and his relationship with William. The legal storm was far from over, and its impact would ripple through every aspect of Harry's life, shaping his decisions, his emotions, and his future in ways that are still unfolding. Not every war is fought in public. Some battles rage quietly behind palace walls, hidden from cameras and headlines, known only to those who live them. For Prince Harry, The stress that led to his emotional breakdown was as much about these hidden conflicts as it was about legal pressure or public scrutiny. Family disagreements, miscommunications, and simmering resentments built over years, creating a landscape where every conversation carried weight and every interaction could spark tension. The royal family is often portrayed as a united front, polished for public appearances, seamless in ceremonies, and composed in the face of global attention. But insiders describe a very different reality, a network of complex relationships, rivalries, and unspoken grievances. For Harry, these conflicts were deeply personal, touching on issues of loyalty, expectation, and autonomy. Unlike the legal battles, which were external pressures, family conflicts were internal. They cut deeper, affecting his sense of belonging, self-worth, and emotional stability. Tensions with William were part of this, but not the only source of strain. Other family members, advisors, and long-standing traditions played roles in shaping a climate that left Harry feeling misunderstood and isolated. Sources suggest that certain decisions, disagreements over duties, and differences in how to manage public image all contributed to an emotional environment that was volatile, unpredictable, and exhausting. One particularly telling dynamic involved the constant negotiation between public duty and personal desire. For most members of the royal family, there is an unspoken understanding. The family comes first, duty comes before personal feelings. For Harry, who has always valued independence and transparency, this expectation created friction. Choosing to pursue personal projects, speak openly to the media, or distance himself from certain royal obligations sometimes felt like rebellion. And in a family steeped in tradition, rebellion, even when justified, carries consequences, both subtle and profound. Insiders describe repeated private disagreements that, while minor in isolation, accumulated into significant emotional strain. Arguments about schedules, appearances, and responsibilities often escalated because they touched on larger issues: respect, understanding, and the balance of power within the family. For Harry, each disagreement was amplified by a lifetime of scrutiny and the expectation to maintain composure. Every clash became not just a matter of opinion, but a symbolic representation of deeper conflicts. The role of communication, or lack thereof, cannot be understated. In families, miscommunication can escalate tensions. In the royal family, the stakes are exponentially higher. Messages are relayed through intermediaries, intentions are misread, and private discussions are sometimes leaked, turning what should be personal disagreements into public controversies. Harry, sources say, often felt that he was navigating a maze of misunderstandings, with few safe spaces to express concerns without judgment or repercussion. Compounding this was the weight of unresolved historical grievances. The royal family is steeped in history, and personal interactions are often colored by long-standing traditions, expectations, and familial patterns. For Harry, this sometimes meant that current conflicts were not just about the present. They echoed past misunderstandings, childhood experiences, and long-held frustrations. Even routine interactions could trigger emotional responses rooted in years of accumulated tension. An example cited by insiders involved disagreements over media engagements. Harry has long advocated for greater transparency and openness, sometimes choosing to speak directly to the public about issues that concern him. Other family members, particularly William, have preferred discretion and careful messaging. These differences, while philosophical on the surface, carry emotional weight. They reflect deeper questions about loyalty, responsibility, and the proper way to represent the family. For Harry, the friction between these approaches created both stress and a sense of isolation. Other sources highlight the challenge of external perceptions. Harry has been acutely aware of how every disagreement could be interpreted by the media and public. Misunderstandings within the family, even minor ones, could be transformed into sensational headlines, further amplifying emotional strain. It became a cycle. Internal conflict led to stress, stress led to missteps, missteps led to public scrutiny, and public scrutiny reinforced the sense of isolation and pressure. These hidden conflicts were not limited to interpersonal disputes. They also involved structural, and procedural dynamics within the family. Decisions about responsibilities, priorities, and roles often became points of tension. Harry's desire to forge an independent path, pursue personal projects, and advocate for mental health sometimes clashed with institutional expectations, creating stress and fueling the emotional strain that culminated in his breakdown. What makes these conflicts particularly difficult is their emotional intensity. Unlike legal battles, which are formal and procedural, family disagreements carry personal weight. They involve love, loyalty, and identity. For Harry, navigating these dynamics required constant negotiation, diplomacy, and emotional labor, efforts that drained his reserves over time. Even small interactions could trigger intense emotional responses, adding to the cumulative stress he was experiencing. The emotional stakes were compounded by a lack of resolution. Unlike workplace conflicts or public disputes, where resolution may be guided by rules or mediation, family conflicts often linger unresolved. Misunderstandings fester, resentments accumulate, and emotional wounds deepen. For Harry, this meant that every disagreement, every miscommunication, and every perceived slight added to an already heavy burden, contributing to the emotional breakdown that would eventually require hospitalization. Insiders recall moments when Harry expressed frustration over feeling unsupported, misunderstood, or constrained by family expectations. He wanted to contribute, to participate, and to engage authentically, but the family's structure and traditions sometimes limited his ability to do so. The resulting tension left him feeling trapped between personal desires and familial obligations, a struggle that many outside the royal family might not fully grasp. And yet, despite the intensity of these hidden conflicts, Harry's relationships within the family were not solely defined by tension. Sources emphasize that there were moments of care, concern, and support. William, for instance, remained involved, concerned, and deeply aware of his brother's struggles. Other family members offered support in their own ways, through private conversations, gestures, or behind-the-scenes assistance. The challenge was that these moments of support were often overshadowed by the intensity of conflicts, miscommunications, and pressures. As the breakdown approached, the hidden family conflicts acted as both trigger and amplifier. They exacerbated stress, heightened anxiety, and deepened emotional exhaustion. They created an environment in which Harry had few safe spaces to process his feelings, and even fewer opportunities to recharge. Each interaction, each expectation, and each disagreement added another layer of weight, pushing him closer to the point of collapse. And just when it seemed that the conflicts were contained, another complication arose, one that would further destabilize Harry and escalate the emotional stakes. A private disagreement, initially thought to be minor, had ripple effects that extended far beyond what anyone anticipated, intensifying both personal strain and public scrutiny. What came next would reveal just how intertwined personal, familial, and public pressures had become, and it would set the stage for a crisis that was as unavoidable as it was shocking. For most people, the media is a source of information, a way to stay connected, entertained, or informed. For Prince Harry, it has been something far more intense, a relentless spotlight, a source of pressure, and often a battlefield. The media's gaze has followed him from birth, amplified every mistake, and dissected every personal moment, leaving no room for privacy, recovery, or even ordinary life. In the weeks leading up to his emotional breakdown, this scrutiny became not just exhausting but dangerously destabilizing. Harry's relationship with the media has always been complicated. On one hand, he understands its necessity. Public awareness is part of life in the royal family. On the other hand, he has experienced firsthand the destructive potential of intrusive reporting. Paparazzi pursuing him relentlessly, tabloids publishing sensationalized stories, and social media amplifying criticism. All of these factors have contributed to a sense of constant surveillance that is both exhausting and inescapable. The stakes of media scrutiny are enormous. For Harry, even personal moments can become global news. Private conversations, family disagreements, and legal disputes often find their way into headlines, sometimes distorted or taken out of context. Every action, from attending a public event to making a personal statement, is scrutinized, dissected, and interpreted in ways that can fuel stress and anxiety. For someone already vulnerable, this constant analysis is emotionally draining. In the months leading up to his breakdown, sources describe Harry as increasingly aware of the media's impact on his mental health. He monitored headlines obsessively, anticipating criticism, and sometimes overanalyzing how stories would reflect on him or his family. Even moments meant to be private were tainted by fear of public exposure. The media had become not just an observer, but a participant in the pressure cooker environment surrounding him. This scrutiny is not just a background stressor. It actively shapes emotional responses. Insiders report that Harry often felt trapped between the need to respond to misinformation and the desire to preserve his privacy. Each news story or social media post could trigger anxiety, irritability, or frustration, making it difficult to find calm or perspective. Over time, the cumulative effect of these pressures contributed significantly to emotional exhaustion. But media scrutiny is a double-edged sword. While it can be a source of stress, it also provides a platform for advocacy and transparency. Harry has attempted to navigate this complex dynamic, using interviews, public appearances, and media statements to communicate his perspective. However, the very act of speaking out often invites further scrutiny, criticism, and unintended consequences. The tension between self-expression and privacy becomes a constant balancing act, one that is uniquely challenging under the global spotlight. Consider the psychological impact. Being constantly watched can heighten feelings of vulnerability and self-consciousness. It can amplify every mistake, magnify emotional reactions, and create a sense of inescapability. For Harry, who had already been grappling with personal grief, family tensions, and legal pressures, media scrutiny became another layer of strain. Even moments of personal achievement or joy were tempered by the anticipation of judgment or misinterpretation. Sources describe instances where media coverage directly contributed to emotional instability. Leaks about legal disputes, misreported conversations, or sensationalized accounts of family disagreements acted as triggers, intensifying anxiety and stress. Harry would replay stories in his mind, consider the impact on his reputation and relationships, and experience heightened emotional responses that were difficult to manage. The media, in effect, became an external amplifier of internal struggles. Yet the relationship with the media is more complex than adversarial alone. Harry understands that public perception matters, particularly in the context of the royal family. Positive stories, charitable work, and advocacy efforts are amplified through media coverage, while negative stories can have disproportionately damaging effects. Navigating this landscape requires constant vigilance, careful messaging, and emotional resilience, a challenge for anyone, let alone someone already under significant personal and family pressures. Insiders note that this scrutiny also exacerbated feelings of isolation. Harry could not fully trust the media to report accurately or sympathetically, which made it difficult to express emotions publicly or seek support through conventional channels. Even friends and allies sometimes had to be cautious in their interactions, knowing that private moments could be leaked or misrepresented. This created a sense of being constantly observed, judged, and vulnerable, a condition that is emotionally exhausting and psychologically taxing. The media's impact is further intensified by social media platforms, where rumors, criticisms, and viral stories spread instantly. For someone in Harry's position, every post can feel like a judgment, every comment a potential attack, and every trend a reminder of the impossibility of privacy. Insiders describe nights when Harry would scroll obsessively, reading headlines, analyzing public reaction, and anticipating fallout. This compulsive attention, while understandable, added to the cumulative emotional strain that led to his breakdown. And yet, despite these challenges, Harry has shown remarkable awareness and agency. He has worked to set boundaries, take legal action against invasions of privacy, and advocate for mental health awareness. These efforts, however, often come with additional pressure. Legal battles against media outlets, public statements about personal experiences, and advocacy work can all trigger further scrutiny. The very tools he uses to protect himself and communicate authentically also increase the demands on his emotional resilience. Media scrutiny also interacts with family dynamics in complex ways. Leaks, misreported statements, and sensationalized stories can exacerbate tensions, miscommunications, and misunderstandings within the family. For Harry, this created a cycle in which private disagreements became public fodder, increasing both family stress and personal emotional strain. Navigating these dynamics required constant vigilance, emotional control, and strategic thinking, a burden that few outside the royal circle could imagine. Despite these pressures, there were moments of respite. Friends and advisors occasionally provided insight, perspective, and support, helping Harry to navigate the relentless attention. Yet these moments were fleeting, and the overarching presence of the media remained a constant challenge. Emotional recovery required both personal reflection and structured intervention, including the eventual hospitalization that confirmed the severity of his emotional exhaustion. And just when it seemed that the media's role was merely a background stressor, another twist emerged. A sensational story that magnified tensions, intensified public speculation, and directly contributed to Harry's emotional strain. This development was not just a minor headline. It acted as a catalyst, accelerating the breakdown and forcing Harry to confront the realities of life under constant observation. What came next would show just how entangled media scrutiny, family conflict, and personal vulnerability had become. The public-facing pressures were inseparable from the private struggles, creating a storm that left Harry exhausted, overwhelmed, and in need of urgent care. The double-edged sword of media attention had cut deeper than anyone expected, and its impact on Harry was only beginning to reveal itself in full. It's one thing to struggle in private. It's another to reach a point where the struggle can no longer be contained, a point where intervention becomes not just necessary, but urgent. For Prince Harry, that point arrived after months of compounding pressures, family conflicts, relentless media scrutiny, and legal battles that showed no sign of abating. The culmination of these forces led to an emotional breakdown, one that would shock the royal family, friends, and the world alike.